Okay, this is a video response to someone who made a comment on one of my videos that I grew up in a cult. Her name is Darsonia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. 22, Darsonia 22. And a couple of things she said in here. First of all, she accused me of not knowing the definition of a cult and that maybe I shouldn't be spurting out my feelings until I knew what the definition was. So I'm going to read the definition that I'm using. There are several different definitions, but this is the one I'm using. Followers of an unorthodox, extremist, or false religion or sect who often live outside of conventional society under the direction of a charismatic leader. And to me, the church that I grew up in, which was the Worldwide Church of God, closely fits that definition of what I'm talking about. Um, so, Sonia 22, you seem like a nice person living up there in Canada, but you're defending, and I'm not even sure you went to the same Worldwide Church of God that I went to. I mean, you might go to the new and improved version of what I went to because you're 22, and you'd be pretty young if you actually went to the one that I'm sort of talking about, the one that Herbert W. Armstrong set the foundation for. But be that as it may, you're defending. Well, let me read you something. Something that I noticed you said. One thing you said, and I'm going to quote you: I grew up strong and happy in the religion, which is fine, and it made me have a lot of values, which is weird. Because what you're saying there is that if you would not have gone to church, and I think I know what you mean, you're saying it gave you a foundation for values, but you didn't actually state it that way. But basically, the way you state it would mean that if you didn't go to church, you wouldn't have values. And that's where I disagree with that statement, that a church somehow gives you these values. I know plenty of non-believers, such as myself, as well as people who don't go to church and just don't know, or maybe believe in God but don't go to church, who have great values. My values are, I believe, every bit as good as anyone who goes to that church for sure, but any church. It was instilled in me by my parents, and I'm passing that on to my kids. The same rules that you go by, I go by. I don't do anything to anything to anyone that I don't want them doing to me. I'm teaching my kids, the same basic values to go along in this world. You don't steal, you don't rob people, you don't murder, you don't rape, you don't use drugs. Um, okay, I'll throw that one out because that's unrealistic. I don't use drugs, but I will admit that I've tried them in my teenage years. So, um, you don't drink in excess. Just the same values that your everyday person has. But I don't have any religion instilling that in me. This is something that I think is right. There's right and there's wrong, and I know I'm going to get people commenting, well, who says there's right and wrong if there's no God? Well, society says what's right and what's wrong in general. In any society, you have certain things that are always wrong. For instance, in every society, 99% of societies, killing someone is wrong. There's just few that they'll sacrifice to some god, or um, or some dictatorships. But 99% of society says that murder is wrong in a society. Um, most societies, and that's that. There are the exceptions, but most societies say that um, rape is wrong. So anyway, you get my point. The foundation is there in every society. There are rules that societies have. So the fact that you have something that you think that makes you stay on the straight and narrow, well, that's fine. You know, um, if I don't want my kid to go to the train tracks, maybe I'll tell him, the boogeyman's over there, and maybe that'll help him to stay away from the train tracks. But as the older he gets, he doesn't need to know that. that he doesn't have to use the boogeyman. He'll understand that, you know, if you play around the train tracks, there's a chance that you may get hurt. So, you know, that's the problem I had with that statement. This is the one I really had a problem with. You said that everyone believes, this is a quote from Darsonia 22. Everyone believes that their religion is the absolute, in capital letters, the absolute truth. Why even be a part of a religion if you don't believe that it is right? That's why I don't belong to any religion. Because the way you're believing, the thing that you're saying there, is what's got this world in a lot of trouble already. We have the Muslim extremists that believe that their religion is 100% right, and their religion says it's okay to behead people if they're infidels, and their religion says it's okay, you know, the extremists. I'm not saying that all Muslims think this way, but the extremists, this is what this kind of statement leads to. This kind of statement leads to extremists, leads to the extreme. So you have these people that are running planes into buildings, and it's not just the Muslims, it's the Christians too. You got the guys that are going to go blow the abortion clinics up with bombs, and all under the guise that somehow they have the true word of God, the absolute truth. So yeah, you know, the video I made, which is almost a year ago, I was quite passive on. But let me tell you something. The Worldwide Church of God, for as many things that were good in it, there was a lot of things that haunt me to this day. And maybe if I go see a psychiatrist, I can get my head wrapped around it. But the fact that there's still certain foods that I feel weird eating, or I don't eat at all, because it was ingrained in me at a young age that, you know, they were, it was a sin. That's pretty warped way of thinking. Well, you know, and somebody can come back and say, well, you know, pork's not good for you, or seafood's not good for you. Well, some of the things that are in there that you can eat aren't that good for you either. So I don't want to get any comments about that. Another thing that you said in your comment is that for those interested, the Living Church of God isn't some hell spawn. They're not full of dictators. And that was the first part of you grew up happy and it gave you value. So, no, I'm not saying that all the people that, all the ministers there and were dictators. But believe me, I ran into a few that were in my years there that were absolute dictators. And if you disagreed with them, you would get disfellowshipped. And you know, let me explain to the people who aren't familiar with the doctrine of the Worldwide Church of God, especially under Herbert W. Armstrong. To get disfellowshipped is basically to go to hell. Unless you somehow repent, which repenting meant sometimes, because I knew some people that got disfellowshipped who later on I talked to and asked him exactly what the problem was. One guy, there was a guy who was disfellowshipped, and there was another guy who wasn't. And the guy who wasn't was socializing with the guy who was disfellowshipped. And the guy who was disfellowshipped offered the guy who wasn't a car to drive, because the guy who was in the church basically didn't have a car to get around. And the minister told him to absolutely not accept the car, or he would be disfellowshipped, and to stop associating with this other individual. And so that guy ended up, the guy who wasn't disfellowshipped ended up getting disfellowshipped for basically giving them the old FU. You know, I think literally told that guy, the minister there, to take a hike. But to get disfellowship meant that unless you repented, you wouldn't be able to be a part of this cult. And that meant that since you had the absolute truth, there was no other opportunity for you. So disfellowship was a way to keep people in line. You know, if you don't listen to me, and for some women, if you know, at one time it was against church policy to wear makeup. So if you were wearing makeup at home and you got caught, you know, you had the risk of basically getting disfellowshipped and going to hell. So as much as you say it was that the Living Church of God is not full of dictators, it's full of quite a few. At least when I was there, it was full of quite a few dictators. So I disagree with you there. I didn't say it was all dictators, but certainly it had quite a few dictators, and that's just a few stories. Okay, so you know, to come on here and act like everything was great or everything was hunky dory, and you know, that somehow I'm bashing the religion just for the sake of revenge. The only reason I'm making this video is because I read your comment and I was like, you know what, okay, because other people were making comments, and finally I just said, okay, well, I might as well just make another video about it, and this time not be so nice about it, because as much as things that I enjoyed, like I said, there's plenty of things that still haunt me to this day, and it's not something that'll show up in my everyday work or everyday life, but certainly certain idiosyncrasies that I had come from that cult, come from that upbringing, that horrible, just being different, going to school, and on Saturdays, you know, Friday night to Saturday, basically being on lockdown, just being different. You know, it's already tough enough growing up as a kid, but just being that different, and trying to explain to people and having an arrogance about it, saying that, well, you don't understand because God didn't give you the understanding. One day you'll be all right. One day after you die and get resurrected, you'll get the truth, and then you'll understand. But I have the truth. I know. God's giving me the pass right now. Sorry for you, but God gave me the pass, so I have the truth, and I'm going to the kingdom, and I'm not going to have to suffer like some of you people. That kind of arrogance. Yeah, there's no place on this earth for it. And Darsonia 22. If you're happy going to a church, I'm not trying. By all means, go for it. But just don't bring it into. And you live in Canada, so you're not affecting the society I live in. But just don't try to let it bleed over into society. And what I mean by that, don't force it down people's throats. Don't force your dogma and try to bring it somehow into law, into man's law, because that's where people like me have problems. When you try to interfere with other people's lives who don't believe the same way as you do. With that being said, talk to you later.